you know what's the scariest thing after turning 80? It's not a stroke. It's not memory loss. It's not cancer. It's this: you're still alive. You still love. You still have things you want to share. But no one asks anymore. No one calls. No one listens. No one notices when you slow down, or when your smile fades just a little more each day. You start to disappear, not because you've died, but because you slowly stop being seen as a person. I'm still here, so why does no one see me anymore? An elderly woman once whispered this in a nursing home in Arizona. That sentence has haunted me ever since. Turning 80 isn't frightening because it happens. It's frightening because it comes so quietly and you're never warned. The older you get, the fewer people check in on you. The stronger you've been, the more they forget that you still need a hand to hold. The more independent you seem, the more they leave you alone. You're still healthy. You're still clear-minded. But one day you realize no one invites you to family gatherings anymore. Dinner passes in silence. The phone doesn't ring. Even the doctor asks your son the questions, not you. If you've ever opened your eyes at 6 a.m. and didn't know why you were waking up that day, if you've ever stood by a window, looking out at the street hoping someone would knock, but no one did, if you've ever felt like no one needs you anymore. Leave a number 1 in the comments, because I want you to know this. You are not alone. And if you feel this topic truly matters, please subscribe to the channel, because we're walking together through a chapter of life that so few people dare to talk about. Yet it's the chapter that needs the most compassion. At the end of this video, I will share something with you that may seem small. It needs no medicine, no caregiver, but it might just bring you back to the feeling of being truly alive. It's a simple habit, something anyone can do, but very few people know that it can shift your entire mood. Stay with me until the end, because sometimes it's the simplest thing that ends up saving us. And for you to understand what this means, let's step into a very ordinary morning in the life of a woman whose name isn't called out often anymore. Mrs. Elsie woke up at 5:45 a.m., just like every day. No alarm is needed. The room was dim, the curtains half drawn. She sat up slowly, bracing herself with one hand. At her bedside was a small Panasonic radio, the same one she'd used since 1978. She gently turned the dial, tuning in to soft, classical music. The sound of violins floated quietly into the room, matching the slow rhythm of a heart that had grown used to silence. Then she stepped out of bed slowly, her feet touching the floor as if gently asking her body, "Are we okay today?" A thin sweater folded neatly by her own hands the night before lay waiting on the chair by the window. Outside, the sun hadn't fully risen. Its light slanted through the curtain, casting a warm golden streak across the worn carpet. She reached out and touched that light as if it were a morning ritual, gentle and full of reverence. In the small kitchen, she boiled a little water. Her hands trembled slightly, but they were still steady enough. The kettle clinked as it heated. She made herself a cup of Earl Grey, the same tea she and her husband used to drink together every morning for 42 years. Now only one chair at the table was pulled out. The other remained pushed in as if he had just stepped out and would be back any minute. On the table sat an unsent letter. Cream-colored stationery, cursive handwriting tilted to the right. "Dear, I'm doing fine. Don't worry, I miss the grandkids." That's how her morning began, quiet, steady, filled with things left unsaid. She stepped out onto the porch. The little house at the end of Willow Lane remained the same quiet, a pair of sparrows chirping on the flower box, the gentle scent of the lavender she had planted last year still floating in the air. Most of the old neighbors had moved away. Now and then, someone new would pass by, offering her a quick smile, polite, but not familiar. She sat on the folding chair outside the one her husband used to sit in while reading the paper. The early morning breeze slid up her sleeve, carrying the November chill. She pulled the scarf higher around her neck and looked out toward the road, a road that once echoed with the laughter of children, the clatter of bicycle wheels, the milkman's calls. Now only the wind remained. Everything around her seemed the same, except now fewer people walked by. Fewer paused. Fewer remembered her. But she was still there, still sitting, still alive, still listening. And the miracle is this: even though nothing special happened that morning, the way she sat, the way she quietly brewed her tea, wrote her letters, gently pulled the curtain open, those things were her silent declaration: I am still here. I still matter. But then that morning, something was different. After a few sips of tea, she glanced at the small calendar on the wall and realized it had been a full week. No phone call from the kids, no letters, no messages. No one reminded her to dress warmly. No one asked if her legs still hurt after the cold snap. That empty feeling quietly crept in. It didn't hurt. It was more like a soft absence. She put her cup down and quietly wondered, am I slowly becoming invisible? That afternoon, she brought out an old photo album. The pictures had faded wedding photos, birthdays, camping trips, family gatherings. Many of the faces in those photos were no longer here. She touched each picture as if asking them, do you remember me? The sunlight slanted through the window, casting shadows on the carpet where she sat surrounded by a circle of memories. And she realized the people who had left didn't take the memories with them, but they took something else. They took the sound of her name. No one said her name tenderly as they once did. That evening, she returned to her unfinished letter. Sometimes I wonder, if I disappeared for a few days, would anyone notice? Then she stopped writing, not because she ran out of things to say, but because her throat tightened. But just when the moment seemed darkest, she heard the familiar metallic clink. The mailman. Inside the mailbox was a small postcard from her granddaughter in another state. Grandma, I'll call you next week. I miss you. Just one line. But it was enough. A single tear slipped down her cheek, soft, silent. And in that moment, she knew she hadn't been forgotten. She hadn't disappeared. The next day, she made a decision, not just to sit on the porch anymore. She brought a small pouch of flower seeds and walked to the park nearby. There was a patch of empty soil, the same spot where she and her husband used to plant daffodils together. She gently placed the seeds into the ground, not for anyone else, but for herself. As if to whisper to the world, I'm still here. I'm still planting hope. Growing old isn't the end of the road. It's a turn in the path, quiet, sometimes lonely, but still filled with meaning if we pause and truly listen. This video was made not to complain, not to grieve, but to face the truth of what happens after 80. Together, we'll explore 5 truths, harsh yet deeply human, about what life truly looks like after someone has lived through almost an entire lifetime. These truths won't show up in medical records or in test results, but they live every day in the quiet of a room, in a glance out the window, in the vague feeling that you're slowly fading from the world. If you or someone you love is in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, this video is for you. Because we're not just talking about loneliness or a slowing body. We're talking about dignity, memory, connection, and hope. Truth number 1, the social circle quietly fades away. Mrs. Elsie once had a small circle of 3 close friends, Mrs. Helen, Mr. Morris, and Mrs. Jean. Every Saturday afternoon, they'd meet for a walk around the small park near her home. No need for reminders at exactly 4 p.m. They would show up at the old stone bench, light jackets in hand, familiar smiles and stories left unfinished from the week before. It was something small, but it made her feel like she still belonged. Then 1 week later, Mrs. Jean didn't come. The next week, Mr. Morris announced he was moving to Florida to live with his daughter. His heart was getting weak. Mrs. Helen's legs had grown too painful for long walks. And just like that, the routine vanished without a chance to say goodbye. Mrs. Elsie kept going to the park for a few more weeks, sitting alone on the same old bench, hoping for a wave or a passing question. How have you been lately? But there was only silence. The evening breeze still came, but no one else was there. The feeling wasn't exactly sadness. It was emptiness, as if a piece of herself had fallen off and she didn't know where to pick it back up. She started to wonder, is the world moving on? And I'm just standing still. Loved ones moved away, old neighbors were gone, and phone calls only went to voicemail. Connections no longer happened naturally. If she wanted to keep them, she had to reach out. One Sunday morning, instead of waiting, she took action. She handwrote a small card. My name is Elsie. I live at the end of the street. If you enjoy classical music and warm tea, I invite you to my home. Saturday afternoon. The door is always open. She placed one in every mailbox along the block. She didn't expect much. But that Saturday afternoon, a lady named Rosemary showed up. The next week, an elderly man came with a plate of cookies. And just like that, the quiet chair on her porch began to fill with voices and laughter again. Not everyone became close, But even one simple question, how was your day, was enough to remind her that she hadn't been forgotten by the world. After 80, your social circle doesn't sustain itself. It must be rebuilt deliberately, sometimes one person at a time. And sometimes a humble invitation is all it takes to connect two quiet souls searching for each other. I promise you this. By the end of this video, you won't just understand the silent struggles older adults face. You'll also see a light, a different way forward, so that none of us have to grow old in quiet confusion or regret. Let's keep going. Up next, we begin exploring the very first truth, something that may be happening to you without warning your social circle. Shrinking silently. Truth for 2. The body no longer recovers like it used to that morning as she slid open the window to water her lavender pots. Mrs. Elsie's foot slipped slightly on a drop of water left on the wooden floor. It was just a small slip. No fall, no injury. But in that brief moment, her heart pounded, her hand grabbed onto the edge of a nearby chair, and her knee locked in place. It took several seconds before she could exhale. But from that day on, she found herself more cautious. No more brisk walking down the hallway. When bending down to pick up a dropped towel, she held onto the table. Movements that used to be instinctive now had to be calculated. Recovery no longer meant just rest a little and I'll bounce back. It now felt more like I need to relearn how to do what I used to do. In the past, if she twisted her ankle while gardening, a few days of rest would be enough. Now just turning the wrong way could take a full week to stop hurting. And strangely, during that week, it wasn't just her back that felt stiff, her heart felt heavy too. It was as if her body had stopped being her loyal companion and had become more like an old clock, quietly slowing down. Sometimes without warning before it would stop ticking. This harsh truth forced her to learn a new lesson. Rest alone doesn't heal. If she didn't move gently, didn't maintain her daily rhythm, her body would begin to forget how to function. And it wouldn't be an injury that made her weaker. It would be the act of no longer using the parts of herself that once moved with ease. Mrs. Elsie started researching small indoor exercises, slow sit-to-stand motions, wrist circles, gentle knee bends. Each morning she turned on the radio, played Mozart, and did 5 simple movements. Not many, but she did them every day. And she discovered something. Not only did her body feel looser, her mood lifted too. No one had told her that after turning 80, recovery doesn't come from pills. It comes from the smallest things: deep breathing, steady footsteps, a morning stretch. Like an old cloth that needs to be unfolded daily to keep its shape, the body also needs to be reminded that it's alive and still wants to live with intention. And those little movements each morning were her way of telling herself she was still choosing to walk alongside her body, not give up on it just because it wasn't the same anymore. Truth number 3, you need more help even if you don't want to. That afternoon, a light rain began to fall. Mrs. Elsie planned to walk to the grocery store 3 blocks from her house to pick up some brown sugar and eggs ingredients for the apple pie she always baked at the beginning of winter. But just as she slipped on her raincoat and grabbed her umbrella, she froze. That dull ache in her left hip, the one that had lingered since last week, suddenly flared as if it were warning her, today is not the day for a long walk. She stood silently on the porch, an old fabric bag in her hand. Part of her didn't want to ask anyone for help. She still wanted to believe she could do everything herself. She didn't want to seem weak. She didn't want to be a burden. But then she slowly reached for her phone, hesitated for a long while, and dialed her daughter's number. When she heard her daughter's soft laugh on the line and the words, "I'll pick it up for you, Mom. It's on my way anyway." Mrs. Elsie felt relieved, but also oddly ashamed. She sat down in the kitchen chair, her hand gently resting on her knee. After 80, needing help is natural, but the feeling of needing someone can feel like admitting you're no longer who you used to be. Someone who once took care of the whole family now feeling fragile, asking someone to open a jar of jam. She had always been resourceful, but now whenever she needed her children for something small, she couldn't help but wonder, am I bothering them? Do they think I'm useless? But gradually she began to notice something. Every time her daughter stopped by to help, they sat together a little longer, drank tea, flipped through the old photo album. What once felt like an inconvenience quietly turned into a connection. There was no complaining, no judgment, just love, gentle and understanding. Mrs. Elsie came to see that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, It was a way to stay connected, a chance to let loved ones feel useful again, a way to keep relationships from fading into silence and pride. From then on, whenever things felt difficult, she would simply ask, "Are you free to stop by?" And slowly that heavy feeling of asking for help disappeared. Her heart felt light like a fresh-baked pie out of the oven, warm, golden, ready to be shared. Truth Venture 4. The feeling of being forgotten by the world. One late autumn afternoon, Mrs. Elsie decided to visit the City Museum, a place where she and her husband used to take their children during the holidays. In her memory, it had been a vibrant place filled with history, art, and wonder. But that day, as she stepped inside, she felt like a shadow lost in a crowd. She walked slowly through the exhibits, pausing in front of a radio from the 1950s, the very same model she had used when she was 19. She smiled, wanting to share a memory with the young woman standing nearby. But before she could speak, the girl turned away, her eyes fixed on her phone. At a special wartime exhibit, she listened as the guide talked about World War II. She wanted to chime in to add a few details because she had lived through it and had witnessed things that never made it into books. But no one asked. No one looked up. She stood there like an old object no one knew how to use. The feeling wasn't pain, it was a quiet fading, as if time had swallowed up her presence. As if her experiences, her memories, and even her sorrows had become nothing more than a faint echo in a room full of people who weren't listening. That evening back home, she sat quietly in her chair, gently touching an old photo on the wall, alone. But then she remembered something her husband once said, "You're a living library, and if you don't speak, no one will know where the rare books are kept." She reached for a piece of stationery, this time not right to her children, but to the local community center. "My name is Elsie. I'm 84 years old. I used to be a teacher. I'm willing to share stories about the war, old recipes, and the small life lessons that time has taught me. If anyone would like to listen, I'd be happy to speak." A week later, someone called back. She was invited to speak at the local book club meeting. She spoke slowly but with warmth. Everyone sat quietly listening. Some teared up, some laughed, and afterward a few young people came up and asked if they could hug her. She realized she wasn't invisible. The world was simply too busy to see clearly. But if you dare to step forward and speak, there are still ears willing to hear. And what she understood most deeply was this: no one is an old piece of furniture. Every older adult is a living book. You just need someone patient enough to turn the pages. Truth number 5. If you don't redefine purpose, regret will swallow you after the storytelling session at the book club. Mrs. Elsie returned home and sat quietly by the window, the same spot where she often watched the late afternoon light paint the rooftops across the street in soft gold. Something was settling inside her, not exactly joy, not quite sorrow, but a floating feeling as if her soul were drifting through a quiet in-between. The next day, as she opened the closet to grab her photo album, she accidentally dropped an old notebook, one her husband had used to jot down retirement plans, a road trip along the West Coast, a lavender garden, a memoir of his years as a teacher. None of it had come to pass, and now she was the only one left. She sat with the notebook for hours thinking to herself, if tomorrow were my last day, what would I regret the most? The answer wasn't the things left undone. It was the silence, the days that passed without purpose, the mornings she woke up without looking forward to anything, the nights she went to bed without feeling she had contributed to anyone's life. But before continuing the story, I want to keep the promise I made to you at the start of this video. There's something that may seem very small, but it's the secret I want to share with you today. It's not a pill. It's not a miracle therapy. It's something simple, yet it's helped many people feel like they were truly alive again, not just existing. I call it the ritual of being present. And here's how Mrs. Elsie made it part of her daily life. She realized that after 80, you don't need grand achievements. You just need a reason to get up. Something that makes you feel useful, even if it's watering plants, writing letters, or simply listening to someone sad. From that day forward, she began writing down the small stories of her life, memories with her husband, lessons from her teaching years, recipes her mother once taught her. She stuck a note on her wall today: write one page for myself and for someone someday. And something shifted. When she had something to look forward to, her heart felt lighter. The old aches were still there, but they weren't burdens anymore. because every word she wrote was a small step pulling her out of the silence. No purpose is too small. As long as it makes you feel alive, still giving, still needed. The next morning, Mrs. Elsie stepped onto the porch earlier than usual. In her hands was a cup of tea, and in her heart, a new idea had taken shape. If every elder holds something precious within them, then maybe they don't need someone to rescue them. Maybe they just need someone to listen, someone to remind them they still have something to give. She thought of her old friends, those who had passed, those who had moved away, those now living in care homes. She thought of herself once silently enduring, sitting alone for hours, feeling like she was fading. But what if all those experiences could be shared? What if what she was learning and feeling now could be a light for someone else? Someone also lonely, also hurting from unnamed sorrows. Then maybe it was time not just to recognize that truth, but to act on it. Not a big act, just one small change, one morning habit, one thing she could do to lift herself from within. And that was the moment she remembered something an old friend once said. There's one small thing I do every morning that makes me stop feeling invisible for the rest of the day. She had never asked what that thing was, but today she decided she would find out on her own. One small, meaningful action she would try, and someday she would share it with anyone who needed it. The next morning, Mrs. Elsie woke up a little earlier than usual. Instead of turning on the radio, she sat still for a while. Then she walked to the kitchen table, carefully placed a blank sheet of paper on it next to the fountain pen she had kept since her teaching days. She began to write, "What am I grateful for today?" Just one question, just a few simple lines. But the miracle was this: her hand didn't tremble. Each stroke of the pen was round, steady and clear, and inside she felt light. Thank you for the clear morning sky. Thank you that my hand can still hold a pen. Thank you that I'm still alive with time to think about those I love. One line each day, one kind thought each morning. She named the habit Tea and a Blank Page, a ritual simple yet sacred that helped her reconnect with herself. No need for help, no need for social media, no lofty philosophy. And then she shared it at the book club meeting. She said, "I used to think I needed something grand to feel like my life had meaning, but it turns out a blank piece of paper is enough." Others began doing the same. Some used notebooks, some wrote on napkins. One gentleman even asked his grandson to print 100 sheets with the question already written at the top. And each morning they wrote as if to remind themselves there's still something to be thankful for. One small habit, but no one expected it would pull so many quiet souls back toward the light. And perhaps this was the secret Mrs. Elsie had once promised to share. Not a miracle, but small things done consistently that reach the heart. And you, if today feels dull or heavy, try something like this: a cup of tea, a blank page. Not to do anything big, just to remind yourself you're still here. You still have something worth writing down. You still have something to be grateful for. Dear friend, when we reach our 80s, no one tells us just how quiet the world becomes. There are no signs that say from here on, fewer people will call your name. Fewer hands will reach out to touch you. And there will be more silence, even on days that seem perfectly ordinary. But within that silence, there is something precious. You begin to hear your own heart more clearly. You remember what once was. You learn to cherish each step, each breath, each moment spent alone, but not lonely. You and I have just walked through 5 difficult truths, but they are also deeply human. They didn't come to make you sad. They came to let you know you are not alone in this journey. Many people, though they may never say it out loud, are walking the same path with the same unspoken ache, the same quiet hope that someone somewhere might understand. And if you've read this far, I believe you are someone who chooses understanding over denial. You choose to look at aging with courage, with eyes that see beyond the wrinkles into the depth beneath. So, where do you begin? Begin with the smallest thing: a kind word, a call to an old friend, a letter you've been meaning to send, or simply a cup of tea and a blank sheet of paper. And if this video has brought you something, even just a moment of feeling understood, please leave a comment. Type 1 if you saw yourself in this story. Type 0 if you're not quite ready, and that's okay too. Subscribe if you'd like to keep walking together, not because of algorithms, but because we need one another. We need a space where no one has to grow old in silence. Thank you for listening. And please remember, you are not a shadow. You are light, perhaps gentler now, but still warm enough to comfort yourself and those around you. See you in the next video. Take care and goodbye for now.